Welcome to our lesson on copyright laws. You know me as your school librarian, Ms. Hernandez. So today our objectives are, what is copyright? What are the elements of copyright? What can be copyrighted? What cannot be copyrighted? What is fair use? And how do you make sure you are following copyright laws? We will go over all of these important topics and more today. So first off, what is copyright? We are all used to seeing this symbol on different items that we look at each and every day. The circle with the C inside. And sometimes it says copyright, all rights reserved. Now, when we see this symbol on items, it's easy for us to know that this item is copyrighted. But not all items have such an easy symbol for us to see, for us to clearly know if it is copyrighted or not. That's why it's important for us to learn what is copyright and how do we make sure that we are following the copyright law. So the definition from the U.S. Copyright Office about what is copyright is, copyright is a form of protection provided by the laws of the United States for original works of authorship, including literary, dramatic, musical, architectural, choreographic, cartographic, pantomimic, pictorial, graphic, sculptural, and audiovisual creations. Copyright literally means the right to copy, but has come to mean that body of exclusive rights granted by law to copyright owners for protection of their work. Copyright protection does not extend to any idea, procedure, process, system, title, principle, or discovery. Similarly, names, titles, short phrases, slogans, familiar symbols, mere variations of typographic ornamentation, lettering, coloring, and listing of contents or ingredients are not subject to copyright. Now that was a lot. What all does that mean? Copyright basically means the laws used to protect others' tangible creative works. Tangible creative works is a very important phrase that I want you to really think about. The word tangible means something that can be touched, and creative means something that was created on their own. Okay? So this is what we are going to dive into. So just keep in mind, the simplified definition of copyright means the laws used to protect others' tangible creative works. What are the elements of copyright? First, it must be independently created. So if you are, or someone else is, trying to copyright something, it must be independently created. That means they have to have come up with it on their own. They cannot take what somebody else has already made and claim it as their own. It must be at least minimally creative. So that is a little bit of a wide range there. The U.S. Patent or Copyright Office says that it must be at least minimally creative and that the law does not necessarily want to govern what is creative and what is not. So the bar for creativity on something being copyrighted is very low, but it must have at least a little bit of effort behind it. And last, it must be a fixed in a tangible medium. What that means is that it must be able to be touched. If it is just an idea that is spoken out loud but never written down or recorded or drawn, then it is not copyrighted. However, this presentation that I've made because I took my ideas and I have written them down on these slides and I am posting it to YouTube, this is copyrighted. Even though I have not gone and registered this item with the Copyright Office, as soon as it is created, it is copyright protected. So even if it's never actually listed with the Copyright Office, it is copyright protected. However, listing an item with the Copyright Office does provide additional protection. So these are 3 things people who want to have something copyrighted, or when you are evaluating to see if something is possibly copyrighted, that you need to keep in mind. Okay, so let's go over what can be copyrighted. Architectural works, dramatic works, literary works, musical works, other audiovisual works, pantomimes and choreography, pictorial, graphic, and sculptural works, and sound recordings. All of these items can be copyrighted, and as soon as they are recorded or tangible, so they are recorded on a phone, they are recorded on a computer, they are written on a piece of paper, a picture is taken. As soon as it's something that can be touched, that can be manipulated, it is copyrighted. So let's say you are working on your project and you want to include a scene from a movie. That movie, because it was produced and it was shared and it has been tangibly recorded, it is copyrighted. And you have to be very careful about how you use that work. The same goes for books or songs that you would like to use. Even memes can be copyrighted. So let's talk now about what cannot be copyrighted. Well, copyright does not cover ideas. So those are ideas that are just in your brain or spoken out loud but never recorded, written down. Procedures, processes, systems, methods, concepts, discovery, facts, names, titles, and short phrases, typefaces, blank forms, familiar symbols, and designs. Some of these items can be trademarked, but that's a lesson for another day. Today we are talking about copywriting. These items though, some of these items, once they are written down or recorded, where they are tangible, once again, whether it's on a phone, on a computer, a piece of paper, once it is tangible, then they can be copyrighted. But until then, if it's just a thought that's out there, just spoken but never recorded, it cannot be copyrighted. So let's talk now about fair use. If we are talking about what is copyrighted and how can we make sure if we are using items that are copyrighted correctly and lawfully, fair use is a way that you can be sure or be more likely to be sure that you are using a copyrighted item correctly. The definition of fair use is an exemption to copyright law for educational and socially important purposes. So when you are going to use a copyrighted item, you have to give credit where credit is due, and you have to use it in a respectable manner. So questions to ask yourself on whether or not you are using this item in fair use. And to tell you, fair use is usually, like it says, for educational purposes. So this doesn't mean you are just doing something at home and you are, say, watching a movie and you decide you're going to show this movie outside and invite everybody in your neighborhood over to come outside and watch this movie with you. That is not fair use of that item. That is not for educational purposes. It is just for enjoyment, and it would not meet fair use. Let's say, though, that you are doing a research project over the Titanic and you want to take a clip from the motion picture Titanic and show the scene where the band is playing even while the ship is sinking. If you take just a small portion of the movie, that specific scene, and show it for educational purposes, then that would be fair use. So to determine if you are using something in fair use, you need to ask yourselves these questions. Why are you using this item? Are you using it for enjoyment or are you using it for educational purposes? How are you using it? Are you showing it to everybody or are you showing it to your class to support what you've been working on? How much are you using it? The example with the Titanic again. If you are wanting to show the clip from the movie to go along with your research project, that would be fair use. If you're wanting to just show everybody the movie Titanic because you think it's a cool movie, that is not fair use. And last, what effect will it have on the market? If you take this item and you use it, will it make it harder for the people who created it to be able to market it or to make money from it? Or will they still be able to use it the way they intended to use it? So for the movie Titanic, once again, go back to that example. If you showed it to your entire neighborhood just for fun, and let's say there's 50 people in your neighborhood. Well, now that's 50 people that don't need to go out and buy their own copy of the Titanic movie because they've already seen it. And that could have an effect on the market. If you are showing just that short little clip of the band playing while the ship is sinking to your class to help explain what happened on the Titanic, that will not have a negative effect on the market. There are several fair use checklists out there. This one is an example of the Orono High School fair use checklist that they created. Actually, they adopted it from the University of Minnesota. But if you click on it, there is a link there to take you to the fair use checklist. It just gives you those 4 questions that we went over, but with more detail. So if you go through the fair use checklist and you honestly review why you are using this copyrighted item, and if you can determine honestly that you are using this item in fair use and there is going to be more good coming out of it than harm, then it is fairly safe to say that you are using that item in fair use and that it is safe for you to use. Now, I know every time you go to put an item in one of your projects, you are probably not going to want to sit down and go over the fair use checklist. But if you keep one handy, you can quickly look at it and make sure that you are being safe and careful on how you are using that item. So how do you make sure you are following copyright laws? We've discussed what copyright is. It is a tangible item that is at least a little bit creative that somebody created independently. Remember, even if it's not listed with the Copyright Office as a copyrighted item, as soon as it's created and tangibly written down or typed or recorded, it is copyrighted and you still have to be careful. So how do we make sure we are following the copyright law? Well, I created this flowchart just as a quick guide for you. So you start off at the top. Is it a copyrightable item? the answer is yes, you go to the left. If the answer is no, you go to the right. We will start off with no because it's shorter. Is it a copyrightable item? No. Then make sure to cite the source in your work. Okay? Is it a copyrightable item? Yes. Then complete the fair use checklist. Go over those questions. Then evaluate your checklist. Does your use of the item constitute fair use? If yes, use the item and make sure to cite the source in your work. If you aren't using it in fair use, then do not use this item or reevaluate your use. If you're showing too much, if it could have a negative impact, if you're not using it correctly, maybe you can change course and still use it, but in a different manner. Now, I do want to talk about how on here I said, make sure to cite the source in your work. Citing where you got a copyright item does not necessarily protect you if you use a copyright item in the wrong way. That is more for plagiarism. If you cite something and you cite it, then it's not considered plagiarism. If you use somebody else's words in a essay you're writing, for example, and you don't cite it, then that would be plagiarism. Copyright is different though. Even though you cite where it came from, that doesn't necessarily mean you are safe. However, when you cite a copyrighted item, it shows good faith that you were trying to be honest in your use of that item. So citing your work is always a good thing to do. You just need to keep in mind citing a copyright item is not necessarily going to keep you out of trouble if you are not using that item correctly. You need to make sure you are using it in fair use for educational purposes without harming the market and in an appropriate amount and means. In summary, you need to find out if the item is copyrighted or copyrightable. Okay, remember copyrighted means that it is tangible, minimally creative, and that somebody created it independently. Ask yourself what, how, and why you are using the copyrighted material. Make sure you are using the item correctly and in good faith. When in doubt, look at the good faith checklist and make sure you cite your sources. Speaking of citing your sources, here are mine. These are the sources I used to create this presentation. I also made sure to list my sources on each slide that I used them in. That way people could see that I really did try to use these items correctly. Do you have any questions? Even if you don't have a question now, let me know if you come up with a question later. I'm always here to help. Thank you and good luck with your project.